Have you ever been pushed so far that you had no choice but to fight back? In a glittering crystal chamber, Ambassador Marcus Kane got to his feet, his face a mask of controlled fury. For 3 long years, humanity had sat at this table, watching ancient alien races carve up their colonies like a Thanksgiving turkey. "You offer us nothing," Marcus's voice sliced through the alien air. 14 barren rocks in exchange for 37 thriving worlds we built with our own blood, sweat, and tears. Across from him, High Leader Velton of the Zenthuri leaned back, his 4 eyes blinking with amusement. "Humans are newcomers to the galaxy," he droned. "You must learn your place before you can demand prime real estate." The serpent-like delegate from the Corvan Empire hissed in agreement. "Indeed," the general added. "Your species has barely been spacefaring for 200 years. We have held dominion over these stars for millennia." Marcus ground his teeth. Behind him, Admiral Lisa Torres, Governor James Wright, and Chief Diplomat Elena Vasquez sat perfectly still, but their anger radiated like heat. They'd expected this, but the sheer arrogance still stung. "Furthermore," Velton continued in a sickeningly sweet tone, "the Council will graciously offer protection to your meager fleet. For a reasonable tribute, of course." The insult was clear. They saw human ships as toys, even though those same ships had defended human colonies from pirates and border skirmishes for decades without a single shred of Council help. Marcus stood a little taller. His gray hair seemed to shimmer in the room's strange light. "We came to this council believing it was a place of fairness and mutual respect." "And you have received fairness," Velton purred, "in proportion to your civilization's contribution to the galaxy." That was the last straw for Admiral Torres. She rose from her chair, her every movement radiating military precision. "Our contributions? You mean like the bioserum that eradicated the Cathar plague, saving millions across 17 different species? Or the terraforming tech that ended the Great Famine in the outer sectors? Or the shield modulators that countless worlds now use for defense?" "Technologies we would have developed ourselves, given time," scoffed Councillor Zephon of the ethereal domain. His gaseous form swirled with contempt. "You simply stumbled upon them first." The condescension in the room was suffocating. Marcus glanced at the assembly. 43 species, and every single one of them was nodding along with the 3 ancient races that ran this whole show. Not one being would speak up for them. Elena Vasquez leaned forward, trying one last time. "Perhaps we could discuss alternative arrangements." "The terms are final," Velton snapped, his metallic fingers tapping the arm of his throne. "Take our generous offer, or return to your insignificant corner of the galaxy." In that moment, something inside Marcus shattered. For so long, humanity had played by the rules, trying to prove they belonged. They shared their science freely. They offered aid in every crisis. They practiced patience in the face of constant disrespect. And for what? To be treated like toddlers begging for scraps at the adults' table. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a sealed data slate, and placed it gently on the conference table. "Then these negotiations are concluded." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Velton eyed the slate with a flicker of curiosity. "What is that, Ambassador?" "Official notice," Marcus replied, his voice rock steady, despite the monumental step he was taking. "That humanity is withdrawing from all Galactic Council proceedings. Effective immediately, all human colonies, trade routes, and territories are hereby declared sovereign and independent of Council authority." General Thexan let out an enraged hiss, his reptilian face contorting. "You cannot simply declare independence. No species has ever dared." "No species has ever been this disrespected," Admiral Torres shot back, stepping up to stand beside Marcus. "There's a first time for everything." Velton's amusement had finally vanished, replaced by a shadow of concern. "Ambassador Kane, I urge you to reconsider. Humanity benefits from our protection. Without it, your colonies will be vulnerable, your trade lanes undefended. That is no longer your concern, Marcus stated flatly. Governor Wright and Elena Vasquez now stood with them, a united front. Humanity is leaving the Galactic Council, starting now. A profound silence fell over the chamber. For a heartbeat, the most powerful beings in the galaxy were utterly speechless. The concept of a species just walking away was unheard of. Finally, Councillor Zephin's gaseous form pulsed with what looked like a sneer. This is folly. You will come crawling back within a standard year, begging for readmission. Marcus picked up his briefcase and nodded to his team. As they walked towards the exit, he paused and glanced back. Councillors, you have made a grave miscalculation today. You mistook our desire for peace as a willingness to accept injustice. You were wrong. The 4 human delegates marched out of the crystal chamber, their footsteps echoing in the stunned quiet. Behind them, representatives from 43 species watched, bewildered, as humanity did the unthinkable. They just left. As the massive doors sealed behind them, Marcus allowed himself a small, grim smile. The council wanted to know what humanity was made of. Well, they were about to find out. Outside the council spire, Admiral Torres fell into step with him. Sir, are you sure about this? The risk we're taking is enormous. Marcus gazed up at the alien sky, where strange cosmic colors swirled in mesmerizing patterns. Lisa, we played their game. We shared our discoveries. We obeyed their laws. We politely asked for a seat at the table. He turned to his team. And they told us to sit on the floor and be grateful for the crumbs. That ends today. Elena Vasquez had a worried look. The other species will see this as an act of rebellion. The council will rally support against us. Some might, Marcus conceded, but others might see it as an act of courage. How many junior members of that council are truly happy with their lot? How many have wanted to stand up, but were too afraid? Governor Wright nodded slowly. The Altarians have been grumbling about their territory assignments for years, and the vegans have been protesting the tribute payments. Even the quiet Raelians have been asking some very pointed questions lately. Exactly, Marcus said. We may not be alone in this, but even if we are, we will face the future as a free people, not as the council's pets. As their ship prepared to depart, Marcus sent a coded, high-priority message back to Earth. The message was short, but it would ignite a revolution. Talks failed. Independence declared. Prepare for consequences. On Earth, President Angela Santos read the message in the Oval Office. She'd been expecting it, but the words still made her heart pound. She pressed a single button on her desk. General Stone, I need you in my office. Immediately. Project Prometheus is a go. The secret plans, years in the making, were now in motion. The council thought they were dealing with a young, fragile species that would fold under pressure. They had no idea what was really coming. Deep in uncharted space, hidden human shipyards hummed to life, activating systems that had lain dormant for this very moment. Ghost fleets the council knew nothing about prepared to leave their secret anchorages. Intelligence networks that had been mapping the council's every move for a decade readied themselves to act. Marcus Kane and his team had just fired the first shot in a war for respect, a war that would redefine the galaxy. The council thought they knew humanity's limits. They were about to learn they hadn't seen anything yet. 3 months later, the galaxy was changing. In the opulent command center of the Zenthari flagship, High Leader Velton stared at the holographic displays, his 4 metallic eyes betraying a growing anxiety. "Report," he commanded, his voice sharp. A nervous intelligence officer named Nixval stepped forward. "Sir, we have anomalous readings from the Outer Rim territories. Human colonial forces have expanded their presence exponentially." "Expanded how?" Velton's synthetic voice was laced with menace. Nixval brought up a 3D star map. Dozens of new red markers, indicating human control, had appeared overnight. 17 systems, previously uncontested, are now fully fortified human outposts. They've established mining operations, defensive platforms, and something else we can't identify. General Thexon's holographic form flickered into existence, his reptilian face a mask of fury. My fleet attempted to probe the Kepler 442 system yesterday. We lost an entire scout wing. Lost contact. Velton's focus sharpened. Destroyed. Worse. They vanished. No distress calls, no wreckage, nothing. But we did detect massive energy signatures from a weapons technology completely unknown to us. Counselor Zephon's gaseous form materialized, pulsing with agitation. The ethereal domain reports similar events. Human ships are appearing in sectors they should have no access to. They're using transit corridors that, according to our charts, simply do not exist. Velton's processor brain raced, calculating the impossible. They can't have developed this tech in 3 months. That's what we thought, Thexon growled. But intercepted chatter suggests humanity has been running a Black Ops program for the last 10 years. They call it Project Pandora. The name alone sent an electric chill through Velton's circuits. What project were they building? No one knew the whole story, but the scale of it was staggering. Every single human colony had pitched in, materials, personnel, and mountains of research data. It was as if our entire species had been secretly preparing for this exact moment. Deep in the Proxima Centauri system, Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, a ship that had just been finished. It was the pinnacle of human engineering, our most advanced warship ever. Unlike the sleek, artistic ships favored by the Alien Council, human vessels were built to look tough and intimidating. They were all business, designed for pure combat effectiveness. The Admiral turned to Captain Rivera at the tactical station. Long-range sensors are picking up Council recon probes. They're trying to sneak past our outer perimeter. A cold smile touched Torres's lips. Let them try. Activate the Phantom Protocol. All around the Proxima system, dozens of empty patches of space suddenly roared to life with energy. Cloaked human installations powered up their systems. The Council races had spent so much time looking down their noses at humanity, they never actually bothered to study what we were capable of. That was an oversight they were about to pay for, dearly. Back on the Council's flagship, Nix File's biosuit was screaming with alarms. Sir, we're getting emergency calls from Trade Convoy Zeta-7. They're saying they've been stopped by human ships near the Vega Junction. Stopped for what reason? The humans are going through their cargo manifests and copying data on all our trade routes. But here's the part that doesn't make sense. The humans knew exactly where and when that convoy would be. They had intel that should have been impossible for them to get. Belton, the Council leader, drummed his metallic fingers on his command chair. For centuries, the Council had held on to its power with superior technology, massive information networks, and the simple assumption that younger species would always need their guidance. The thought that humans might have built their own intelligence network from scratch was deeply unsettling. What about the other junior species? He asked. Are any of them starting to act this independent? Zephon's holographic form flickered, a sign of what could only be worry. That might be the most alarming part. The Altarians have officially asked to renegotiate their territory. The vegan Commonwealth has frozen their tribute payments, claiming they need to restructure internally. Even the Regalians, who never cause trouble, are suddenly asking very sharp questions about Council policies. The message was crystal clear. Humanity's defiance was lighting a fire, inspiring other species to challenge the old order. General Thexon's hologram leaned forward, his posture aggressive. We need to make an example of the humans, crush this rebellion before it spreads. I have 3 entire battle fleets ready to strike their home systems. And do what, exactly? Belton shot back. We still have no idea what they can do. Every probe we've sent into their space has either been blocked or has simply vanished. Then we send something they can't block. Thexan snarled. A full military force that will demand answers. In a dimly lit briefing room on Luna Station, humanity's ambassador, Marcus Kane, sat across from a woman the Council had never even heard of. General Patricia Stone was the commander of humanity's Black Ops Division. The Council is getting scared, Stone said, her augmented eyes scrolling through tactical data only she could see. They're moving fleets into position. It looks like they're planning a major push into the Sol system. Marcus nodded. We expected that. How many ships? They're putting together a fleet of about 300 vessels. It's their classic move. Try to scare us into backing down. And how are we going to respond? Stone's smile was like a predator's. Operation Prometheus is a go in 72 hours. Every major Council species is about to find out exactly how much we've learned about their military strengths, their trade networks, and their political secrets over the last 10 years. Marcus lifted an eyebrow. You're hitting them all at once? The Council loves to pretend they're a unified power. Let's see how unified they are when they realize we've been living inside their most secure computer systems for years. Stone brought up a holographic map of the galaxy's power dynamics. They thought we were just clueless beginners. They're about to find out they've been sharing their galaxy with apex predators. As if on cue, Marcus's private communicator lit up. Velton's artificial face appeared in the hologram, his 4 eyes burning with fury. Ambassador Kane, I assume you've had time to rethink your rather childish departure from our last meeting. Marcus leaned back, looking perfectly at ease. Actually, Counselor, I've been incredibly busy. But by all means, how can humanity help you today? The casual tone clearly enraged the Council leader. Your species' recent expansion into new territory has not gone unnoticed. The Council demands you explain these aggressive moves immediately. Aggressive? Marcus laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh. We're just claiming the same rights that every other species in this galaxy enjoys. Unless, of course, the Council believes those rights don't apply to humans. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Your fleets are operating in sectors far outside the territory you were assigned. Assigned by who? Marcus asked, his tone deceptively sweet. We left the Council, remember? Your assignments don't mean anything to us anymore. Velton's metal face seemed to twist in frustration. The Council will not stand for this. You're upsetting the Galactic Order. Pull your forces back to your designated space at once, or you will face the consequences. Marcus stood, his relaxed demeanor gone, replaced by cold steel. Counselor Velton, let me make this perfectly clear. Humanity tried to work with you. We offered friendship, we shared our technology, and we asked for peaceful coexistence. He leaned in close to the hologram. But you made one gigantic miscalculation. You assumed that because we wanted peace, we weren't capable of war. The transmission cut out, leaving Belton staring into empty air. On Luna Station, General Stone glanced at her timer. 68 hours until Prometheus. Marcus gave a grim nod. The Council wanted to see what humans were capable of when they were pushed too far. Well, they were about to get their answer. General Thexan stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Corvin's Wrath, watching his massive war fleet assemble. 300 warships from a dozen different Council races hung in the blackness of space, a shining display of power that had kept the galaxy in line for thousands of years. Their different designs were a testament to the technological dominance that had held the galaxy in its grip for millennia. Status report, he growled at his tactical officer. All ships are ready for the jump to the Sol system, General. Our long-range scans show only a minimal human fleet presence. Intel says they're pulling their forces back to defend their core worlds. A cruel grin spread across Thexan's reptilian face. Predictable. They're going to make a last stand at their home planet. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is General Thexan. We jump to human space in 30 minutes. Our mission is simple. remind them who's in charge, and force humanity back into line. What the general had no way of knowing was that his secure communications were being streamed live to a human intelligence agent named Dr. Alex Morgan. Morgan was in a secret facility, buried deep under the surface of Mars. His fingers flew across holographic screens as he tracked not just Thexan's fleet, but similar military buildups all across Council territory. "Prometheus Control, this is Monitor Station 7, Morgan said into his headset. "Council forces are moving just as we predicted. Centauri surveillance ships are gathering around the Rael sector. Ethereal domain fleets are mobilizing near the Galactic core. All the dominoes are in place." The voice that replied belonged to General Stone herself. "Confirmed 7. Execute Operation Prometheus on my signal." Across the galaxy, the same scene was happening over and over as human operatives who had spent years living undercover in Council society got ready to pull the trigger and reveal just how deep humanity's roots had grown into their enemy's most vital systems. High Leader Velton was looking over tactical reports when his main data screen suddenly went black. Red emergency lights flooded his command center as backup systems sputtered to life. "What's going on?" he yelled. His intelligence chief, Nixval, was frantically trying to get the systems back online. "Sir, we have massive system failures across every network. It's like something is taking our information grid apart, piece by piece." "That's impossible. Our systems are protected by quantum encryption. It would take centuries to break through our firewalls." Nixval's biosuit began to flash with critical failure alerts. "Sir, the firewalls aren't being broken. They're being bypassed. Whoever is doing this already has the master access codes." Before Velton could even process that, every single screen in the command center flickered on at the same time. They all showed the exact same image: Ambassador Marcus Kane, sitting calmly in what looked like a simple human office. "Greetings, Leader Velton," Marcus said, his voice echoing clearly through the room's speakers. "I do hope we're not interrupting anything important." "Kane!" Belton snarled. "What is the meaning of this attack?" "Oh, this isn't an attack," Marcus replied cheerfully. "It's just a little demonstration of what we can do. You see, while you were busy treating us like we were children, we were busy doing what humans do best: adapting, learning, and preparing." Identical scenes were happening all over the Council's territory. On the ethereal domain's homeworld, Councillor Zephon watched in sheer terror as his people's most secure databases were hacked and taken over by an unknown human program. General Thexan found that his fleet's navigation computers were now showing human star charts instead of council maps. But the biggest shock of all was still to come. "You're probably wondering how we got past your security," Marcus began, his face appearing on screens across 43 different worlds. "The answer is actually pretty simple. We've been inside your networks for over 8 years. That single statement sent a tidal wave of shock through the Council's leadership. 8 years? That meant humanity had been spying on them since before they even knew humans existed. "You see," Marcus explained with a calm that was almost terrifying, "when we first picked up your communications, we decided to play it cool. Instead of just shouting hello, we took a few years to really get to know you, your society, your tech, your way of doing things. We learned all your languages, mapped out your shipping lanes, and figured out who really holds the power." In his ear, Dr. Morgan's voice was a steady whisper. "All their spy networks are ours. We see every ship they have, and we know exactly what they can do." Marcus gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "By the time we officially said hello, humanity knew more about the Galactic Council than most of its own members. We knew about your secret fights over territory, how you divvy up resources, and let's just say, your rather low opinion of new species like us." In his command center, High Leader Felton felt a cold dread he hadn't experienced in centuries. "If they've been in our networks for 8 years, they know everything," Nixval stammered, his biosuit flashing alarm colors so fast it looked like a strobe light. "Fleet movements, defense plans, secret deals, trade agreements, all of it." On the screen, Marcus's image offered a chilling smile. But knowing things is just the beginning. The real question is, what are we going to do with all that information? As if on cue, alerts started screaming from every corner of Council space. Human ships, not the clunky basic vessels the Council had seen before, but sleek, advanced warships that had been hiding for who knows how long, were suddenly appearing out of nowhere. General Stone's voice boomed across every Council channel, overriding all other broadcasts. "Attention, Council forces! You are ordered to pull back from all disputed territories. Return to your home systems, now!" On his flagship, General Thexan let out a reptilian roar of pure fury. "Impossible! How could they have ships where we've never seen a thing?" His tactical officer's voice trembled. "Sir, our sensors are picking up human ships in 17 systems we thought were empty. Sir, they're everywhere." The horrifying truth was slowly sinking in for the Council's top brass. Humanity hadn't just been staying in its assigned little corner of the galaxy. They had been quietly spreading out, right under their noses, without anyone ever noticing. Ambassador Kane's voice picked up where Marcus left off. "For far too long, you've believed that having the biggest ships and the best tech gives you the right to rule. You got lazy, you got arrogant, so sure that younger races would always need you to hold their hands." On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Admiral Torres watched her fleet slide into attack formation around General Thexan's armada. One moment the Council ships were cruising along, the next they were completely boxed in by vessels that seemed to materialize out of thin air. "Admiral," Captain Rivera reported, "all fleets are in position. Operation Prometheus is a go." Torres opened a channel. "General Thexan, this is Admiral Torres of the United Earth Space Command. You are surrounded by a superior force. I highly recommend you rethink your plans." Thexan's reply was a crackle of rage and disbelief. "Surrounded by what? I see maybe 50 of your pathetic ships." "Look again, General," Torres said coolly. "And this time, use your best scanners." When Thexan's crew fired up their most advanced sensors, the tactical map exploded. What looked like 50 human ships was actually over 200. Their advanced cloaking technology finally switched off, a tech the Council had no idea even existed. Back on the Council's capital worlds, Marcus Kane was ready to deliver the final, crushing blow to their pride. "The Galactic Council made one huge mistake," he said, his voice now being broadcast across the entire galaxy as his teams took over every last communication network. "You assumed that because we wanted peace, we couldn't fight a war. You thought that because we shared our technology, we didn't have any secrets of our own." He leaned in, his face hardening. "You were wrong, on both counts." Dr. Morgan launched the final phase of Prometheus. All across Council space, secret files began popping up on government terminals, military servers, and public news feeds. Secret trade routes, hidden for centuries, were now public knowledge. Embarrassing details of military deployments were laid bare for all to see. Political scandals that had been buried for decades were suddenly trending topics on dozens of worlds. "This is what we learned in our 8 years of watching you," Marcus's voice narrated. "Every dirty deal, every corrupt official, every secret war that kept your people down while the Council's elite got rich. The chaos was instant. On 7 different worlds, full-blown riots erupted within the first hour, as populations that had been loyal for generations suddenly learned the truth about their rulers. The age of the Council's undisputed power is over," Marcus declared. "Humanity is offering you a simple choice. Work with us as equals, or keep learning the hard way what happens when you treat us like we're beneath you." The broadcast cut out, plunging the Council chambers into a stunned, deafening silence. Then General Stone's voice returned. "All Council forces have exactly 24 hours to withdraw. Any ship that doesn't listen will be considered an enemy and will be fired upon." High Leader Felton just stared at his blank screens, his robotic mind desperately searching for a way out, and finding none. In a single, perfectly coordinated move, humanity had shown it was just as powerful, if not more so, than the oldest races in the galaxy. And they had made it crystal clear they were done asking for a seat at the table. 6 weeks later, the galaxy was on fire. High Leader Felton stood in the ruins of his command center, where half the systems were still fried from human cyber attacks. The reports coming in painted a grim picture of his empire completely falling apart. "Sir," Intelligence Officer Nixval said, his biosuit flickering with exhaustion, "we've lost contact with the entire Altarian sector. Last we heard, their whole fleet had switched sides and joined the humans." Felton's 4 metallic eyes stared at the galactic map. Red zones meant war. Yellow zones meant revolution. And the green zones, representing human-controlled territory, were spreading like a virus. "What about the Vegan Commonwealth?" he asked. "Gone," Nixval said flatly. "Declared independence and signed a defense treaty with Earth. The Relians did the same thing yesterday." General Thexon's hologram flickered to life, his reptilian face scarred from recent battles. "My forces are fighting a losing battle across 17 sectors, Felton. We're not just losing, we're being picked apart piece by piece." "Explain," Felton commanded. "They don't fight fair," Thexon growled. "No honorable duels, no battle lines. They ignore all the rules of war. They hit us from every direction at once, using intel to take out our supply lines, our communications, our leaders." Counselor Xeon's gaseous form drifted into view, pulsing with anxiety. "It's worse than that. The secrets they released have started rebellions on 37 worlds." The scale of the disaster was mind-boggling. By exposing the Council's dirty laundry, humanity hadn't just shown off its military, it had exposed the decades of corruption and lies that held the whole rotten government together. Far away in the Vega system, Commander Diana Ross stood on the bridge of the UEES Retribution, looking over the latest battle reports. Her fleet had just wiped out a council convoy, trying to bring supplies to a besieged fortress. "Commander," Lieutenant Foster called out from his station, "long-range sensors are picking up council reinforcements. Looks like it's General Thexon's personal fleet." A grim smile touched Ross's lips. "Finally. We've been hunting that monster for weeks." She opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All right, everyone, you heard the man. Our target is General Thexon's flagship. And remember, the brass wants that reptile brought in alive. He's got a lot to answer for." What Thexon didn't realize was that his secret route into the system had been known to humanity for months. Every jump point, every shortcut the Council used had been turned from an advantage into a perfectly laid trap. When General Thexon's fleet dropped out of hyperspace, he wasn't met with the scattered resistance he'd been promised. Instead, a perfectly formed armada of over 300 human warships was waiting for him, ready to fight. "That's impossible," he growled. "How could they possibly know we were coming this way?" His second-in-command's voice trembled with barely hidden fear. "Sir, they're blocking all our communications and our navigation is fried. We can't call for help and we can't chart a course to escape." What came next wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. The human ships moved with a terrifying precision that suggested they'd been planning this ambush for months. They systematically targeted the known weak spots on the Council's ships, using weapons that seemed custom-designed to exploit those exact vulnerabilities. In less than 2 hours, Thexon's formidable fleet was nothing but a graveyard of burning metal. The general himself was taken prisoner after human soldiers boarded his crippled flagship. Back on Earth, Ambassador Marcus Kane was reviewing Galactic reports when he got the news. His aide, Director Phillips, walked into his office, her face a mix of pride and worry. "Sir, we've confirmed that the general is in our custody. That means the Xantharian ethereal forces are the only major military threat left." Marcus just nodded, his expression still heavy. "And the civilian casualties?" Phillips checked her data pad. Higher than we'd like, sir, but they're within the parameters we planned for. The bigger issue now is political instability, she continued. 17 governments have collapsed in the last month alone. Some of the new groups taking power are, well, they're not exactly friendly. This was the unfortunate side effect of humanity's war against the Council. By exposing the deep corruption and iron-fisted control that held the Galactic government together, they'd also ripped away the very thing that kept order on hundreds of planets. While some worlds were peacefully transitioning to independence, others were spiraling into total chaos. Any news from the resistance groups we've been backing? Marcus asked. It's a mixed bag, Phillips admitted. The Andromedan Liberation Front has set up a new government, and they're asking for our official recognition. But the Centauri rebels have already split into 3 warring factions, and we're hearing reports of ethnic cleansing on New Riel. Marcus sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. This was the true cost of starting a revolution. Sometimes the cure felt just as bad as the sickness. But far away, in the silent, dark space between galaxies, a secret meeting was about to change everything. High Leader Velton's private ship was approaching a colossal station that almost no one in the galaxy even knew existed. It was called the Nexus, and it was home to the Harbingers. The Harbingers were the oldest species in the galaxy, ancient before the Council was even formed millions of years ago. They had stepped back from galactic politics eons ago, choosing to simply watch and occasionally nudge younger races from the shadows. Their technology was so far beyond everyone else's that it might as well have been magic. Velton was led down hallways that seemed to twist and warp reality itself. He walked past chambers where entire star systems shimmered like holographic models. At last, he was brought before the Harbinger Prime, a being made of pure light, held inside a massive, crystalline frame. Young Zenthari, the Harbinger's voice echoed directly inside Velton's mind. You've come asking for our help against the humans. Velton explained with desperation. The balance of power is shattering. If humanity isn't stopped, the entire galactic order will crumble. The Harbinger Prime interrupted, its voice calm and ancient. It will change, just as it has changed countless times before. So tell me, Zenthari, why should we get involved in your war? Velton's metallic face showed his confusion. Because humanity is a threat to the stability you've helped protect for thousands of years. Is it? The being of light pulsed gently. Or does humanity simply threaten your species' grip on power? We have watched the humans very closely since they first reached for the stars. They are interesting. They are dangerous, Velton insisted. They're expanding without any control. Their methods are brutal. They've thrown dozens of worlds into chaos. Yes, the Harbinger Prime agreed. And by doing that, they've achieved something incredible. They have forced a stagnant galaxy to evolve. For far too long, the Council species have ruled through fear and control, not through new ideas and growth. A cold feeling washed over Velton, and it had nothing to do with the temperature of the station. You're not going to help us, he stated, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. On the contrary, the Harbinger Prime replied, we are going to help you, just not in the way you imagine. The crystal being started to glow even brighter. Go back to your people, Zenthari. Tell them the Harbingers give you one choice. Surrender. Surrender? Velton's artificial voice box cracked. Unconditional surrender to humanity. The terms will be negotiated directly with the government on Earth. The only other option is your complete and total annihilation. Velton started to argue, but the Harbinger cut him off. You are not seeing the full picture, young one. The humans have already won. They won the moment they walked out of your negotiations and decided to act as your equals instead of your subjects. What you're fighting now isn't a war, the Harbinger continued, its light pulsing with something that felt like amusement. It is the predictable outcome of your own failures. Did you really think a species that could reach the stars in just a few centuries would be happy with the scraps you threw them? Did you believe that beings who not only survived, but thrived on one of the galaxy's most brutal homeworlds would be scared off by your shiny ships? Velton's mind processed the terrifying logic of it all, and a feeling like despair washed over him. You're saying humanity was always going to challenge us? Not challenge you, Zenthari. Replace you. The humans are evolution in action, a young, adaptable species with the raw drive to take the next great step. The Council species grew lazy with power and corrupt with authority. You've forgotten what it means to fight, to adapt, to grow. The audience was over. Crystalline walls began to form around Velton, getting ready to send him back to his ship. Remember our terms, Zenthari. Surrender now while you still have something to bargain with. If you continue this war, humanity will have no choice but to remember you as just another extinct civilization. As Velton's ship pulled away from the Nexus, he carried a terrible truth that would change the future of the galaxy. The war wasn't about land or resources. It was about survival. And only one side was going to make it. 3 months after the Harbingers delivered their ultimatum, High Leader Velton found himself standing in a place he never dreamed he would visit. He was in the United Nations Assembly Hall in New York City, on Earth. By galactic standards, the building was incredibly plain. It was made of simple stone and metal, with none of the living, breathing architecture of Zenthari cities, or the glowing, ethereal designs of other advanced races. And yet this simple room now held the fate of the entire galaxy. Standing with him were the last leaders of the once powerful Galactic Council, Councillor Zeon, whose gaseous form seemed smaller now, Admiral Kexter of the defeated Corvan Empire, and a few other delegates from the species that had survived the war. All of them wore the same look of defeat, a mix of exhaustion, fresh scars, and the hollowed-out expression of those who had watched their entire world crumble. Seated across from them was humanity's negotiating team, led by Ambassador Marcus Kane. He was joined by Admiral Torres, General Stone, and a woman Velton didn't recognize named Rebecca Martinez, Earth's Secretary of State. "Before we start," Secretary Martinez said, her voice quiet but full of the unmistakable authority of a victor, "I want to acknowledge the courage it took for all of you to be here today. Surrender is never easy, especially for peoples who have ruled the galaxy for thousands of years." Velton felt a bitter sense of irony. Even after crushing them, the humans were offering them a measure of dignity, something the Council had never bothered to offer anyone else. "However," Martinez went on, "let's be perfectly clear about where things stand. The Galactic Council, as a government, no longer exists. Your militaries have either been destroyed or have surrendered to our allies. Over 60% of your old territories have declared their independence and have asked Earth for protection." She brought up a holographic map of the galaxy. The huge, solid blocks of color that once represented the Council's empire were gone. In their place was a complex mosaic of independent worlds, human-allied systems, and contested zones, painting a picture of a much more diverse galaxy. "The question we need to answer today is simple," she said. "What kind of future do we want to build from the ashes of the old one?" Admiral Sexter, a reptilian whose face was now covered in cybernetics from war injuries, leaned forward. "You humans talk about building a future, but all you've created is chaos. Dozens of worlds are tearing themselves apart in civil wars. Trade routes that fed billions of people have completely collapsed. Your so-called liberation has cost more lives than centuries of Council rule ever did." The angry accusation hung heavy in the room. Velton watched Ambassador Kane's face closely and saw the human give a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Admiral Sexter," Kane said calmly, has a valid point. I'll admit, Kane said, the shift from council control to self-rule has been chaotic. He leaned forward. But let's be honest about whose fault that really is. Before the alien delegate could even form a reply, Kane pressed on. For hundreds of years, your council held on to power by keeping every other species divided and completely dependent on you. You actively smothered any attempts at local government, crushed any spark of independent economies, and built a system where planets couldn't even function without your thumb on the scale. General Stone spoke for the first time, her cybernetic eyes glowing with tactical readouts as she looked over the defeated aliens. Did you honestly think that yanking away all those supports you built wouldn't cause a little turbulence? The chaos you're wringing your hands over isn't our fault. It's the bill for your policies finally coming due. Counselor Zephon, a being made of shifting gas, seemed to sag with resignation. There may be some truth to your words, but that doesn't change the facts on the ground. Billions are suffering as this transition plays out. Which is precisely why we're here. Secretary Martinez cut in, her voice as smooth as silk. Earth is ready to roll out a massive reconstruction and aid program for every single former council territory. We're talking medical supplies, food convoys, and technical experts to help you build stable governments and get your economies back on their feet. She let the offer hang in the air, letting them feel its weight. But of course, there are conditions. Velton's mind raced, calculating the price. He expected the usual terms of a conqueror: tribute, surrendering territory, handing over their best technology. He braced himself for the utter humiliation of begging for humanity's mercy. But what Martinez said next completely blindsided him. Condition number 1. Every former council species has to formally recognize the complete independence and sovereignty of every single world. No more colonies, no more tribute systems, and no more of this nonsense that older species have some divine right to rule the younger ones. The terms were insane, but not totally out of left field. Velton gave a slow, cautious nod. Condition number 2. We will create a new galactic government, founded on the principles of total equality and mutual respect. Every species gets one vote. It doesn't matter how old you are, how advanced your tech is, or how big your army is. This was a shocker. A democratic galactic body would give a species like humanity, with its booming population and rapid expansion, an unbelievable amount of influence. Condition number 3, Martinez went on, is absolute transparency in all dealings between species. That means no more secret spy games, no more hidden fleets, and no more shady backroom deals that screw over other species without their knowledge. The sheer irony of it was so thick you could choke on it. The humans were demanding the very transparency they had spent 8 years violating with their espionage against the Council. And the final condition, Martinez said, her voice turning hard as diamond. Justice. For war crimes committed in this last war, and for the crimes committed over centuries of Council tyranny. This was it. This was the part Velton had been dreading. What? What kind of justice? He managed to ask. Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, set up on any world that asks for one. Public trials for any military commander who ordered attacks on civilian populations, and reparations for the species you exploited and oppressed for centuries. Martinez's eyes scanned the faces of the defeated aliens. However, we will also offer full amnesty to anyone who cooperates completely with this new transition. Admiral Torres leaned into the light. We're not here for revenge, he stated plainly. We're here to build something better than the garbage fire you left behind. The negotiations stretched on for weeks as they hammered out every last detail of what would eventually be called the Terran Accords. The final treaty was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't a list of demands for the losers. It was a blueprint for cooperation, mutual defense, and shared prosperity. The new Galactic Democratic Union would have its headquarters on a neutral world, with Earth acting as the sole guarantor of its charter. Species who had been silenced for generations under council rule were suddenly given a full vote and a voice. Trade routes were thrown open to everyone, with the only rules being basic environmental and safety standards, not political backscratching. But the most revolutionary part was the core principle: no species has the right to rule another without their consent. It was a complete rejection of everything the Council had stood for. As Velton signed the last of the documents, he couldn't help but marvel at the irony. In just a few months, humanity had done what the Council had always claimed was impossible. They had built a system where countless different species could live together as equals, not as masters and servants in a ladder built on age and power. "Leader Velton," Ambassador Kane said after the ceremony was over, "I want to be clear. Humanity holds no grudge against your people. The Zenthari have given much to the galaxy, and we hope you'll continue to do so in this new era." Velton looked at the human who had been his mortal enemy just weeks before. He expected to see a smug conqueror, but instead he saw someone who looked almost sad that a war had been necessary at all. "Why?" Velton asked, genuinely baffled. "You've won. You have everything. Why show mercy to us after we oppressed you for so long?" Kane offered a weary smile. "Because mercy," he said softly, "is what separates civilization from savagery, leader. The Council ruled with fear. We want to lead with hope and cooperation." 6 months later, Velton was standing in the assembly hall of the brand-new Galactic Democratic Union. He watched in awe as delegates from 127 different species passionately debated trade laws. Under the old council, such a thing would have been unthinkable. The once mighty Zenthari now had exactly one vote, just like everyone else. Their voice mattered, but it no longer drowned out all the others. He had to admit it was shockingly fair. Admiral Torres came over to him during a recess. "Any regrets, leader?" Velton thought about it for a long moment. His people had lost their empire, their status, their absolute power over younger races, but they'd gained something he never expected: respect that was earned through their ideas, not demanded at the point of a gun. "My only regret," he finally answered, "is that it took a war to teach us a lesson humanity seemed to know from the start. That real strength doesn't come from controlling everyone else. It comes from working together as equals." Torres nodded. "It took us a while to learn that lesson ourselves. The important thing is that we all got there in the end." As the meeting started up again, Velton listened as a young Alarian delegate made a fiery speech about protecting the environment in the Outer Rim. Right next to her, a vegan representative offered a technical fix, while a human advisor quietly provided data on the economic effects. This, he realized, is what the galaxy could have been all this time. Not a pyramid with the old and powerful at the top, but a community of equals, all pulling together to reach the same goals. The Council had always believed that some beings were just born better than others. Humanity had won because they proved the only true superiority is having the wisdom to know that's a lie. In the end, that wisdom didn't just win them a war, it won them the galaxy. The vast meeting hall on Nexus Prime was electric with anxious whispers. Leaders from 12 different alien species gathered around a massive, glowing crystal table, the air thick with a sense of dread. Through the panoramic windows, 3 moons floated in the deep purple sky like giant, unblinking eyes. Admiral Keth stood before them all. The light glinted off his blue scales, and his yellow eyes were heavy with exhaustion. He'd been fighting a losing war for far too long. A holographic map glowed behind him, showing the grim state of the galaxy. Angry red dots marked the graves of entire worlds. "My friends, my allies," Keth began, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. We've lost 17 colonies in just the last few months. The Void Reapers are advancing faster than we ever imagined. Their ships phase right through our shields as if they're not even there. Our most powerful weapons barely leave a scratch on their hulls. A tall, slender being with shimmering silver skin raised a hand. Ambassador Lyra's voice was like the chime of delicate glass. What of the outer colonies? Should we not be evacuating our people to safer systems? Evacuate them to where? General Voss roared, slamming a metal fist on the table with a thunderous crack. There are no safe systems left. These things are a plague, and they leave nothing but dust behind them. We are warriors, not cowards hiding in caves. The room erupted into a heated, angry debate. Some screamed to fight to the last, while others argued for a full-scale retreat. But no one had a single idea that could actually lead to victory. The Void Reapers possessed technology so far beyond them, it might as well have been magic. From the back of the room, a quiet, ancient voice cut through the noise. There may be another way. All heads turned. Elder Nyx, leaning on a simple walking stick that clicked against the polished floor, made his slow way toward the table. He was ancient, even for his long-lived people, and his pale eyes seemed to hold the weight of 1,000 years of history. "What are you rambling about, old one?" General Voss demanded, though his tone was softer now, tinged with respect. Elder Nyx reached the holographic map. He tapped a control, and the display shifted, showing star charts from a time long past, when the galaxy was still young. "In the oldest records," he said, his voice a soft whisper, "there are stories. Legends of a species called humans. They came from a small, blue world, tucked away at the very edge of the galaxy. They called these humans the most legendary warriors to ever exist." A few of the aliens seated at the council table chuckled. Others just looked baffled. Humans were just stories, right? Everyone knew that. "Fairy tales aren't going to save us," Admiral Keth said, though his voice was gentle towards the old scholar. But Elder Nyx pressed on, saying, "The legends claim their ships were like floating cities of death. They had weapons that could shatter entire planets, and the humans themselves fought with such a terrifying fury that their enemies would rather run than ever face them on the battlefield." "Even if they were real," Ambassador Lyra added softly, "they vanished a long, long time ago. No one's seen a human in over 1,000 years. They're just myths now." "Perhaps." Elder Nyx gave a slow nod. "But the old archives tell a different story. They say the humans never died out. They say the humans chose to leave, to journey somewhere beyond the edge of the known galaxy. The records insist they would only return when the Great Darkness came back." General Voss shot to his feet, his armor clattering loudly. "This is a waste of time. We need guns and warships, not bedtime stories." "What kind of weapons did these supposed humans have?" Admiral Keth asked. He didn't believe a word of it, but at this point, he was desperate enough to listen to anything. Elder Nyx tapped the controls again, and new images lit up the room, showing bizarre ship designs that looked nothing like anything flying in the galaxy today. The archives mentioned something called plasma cannons that could turn entire fleets into molten slag. They had shields that could take any hit and then blast that same energy right back at their attacker. But their ultimate weapon was something the records simply call human stubbornness. They would never give up, never fall back, and never stop fighting until they either won the day or died trying. "So where are these amazing warriors now?" General Voss demanded with a smirk. "Gone," Elder Nyx had to admit. "But maybe not for good." The meeting dragged on for hours, but they couldn't agree on anything. The Federation leaders just argued in circles about escape routes and defense plans. None of them saw the tiny device tucked away in an air vent right above their heads, recording every single word. Far, far away in the cold, deep blackness between the stars, a ship drifted like a ghost. It was designed to look like a forgotten piece of space debris, but inside, it was very much alive. Captain Ross sat in his command chair, watching the transmission from the Federation capital, Nexus Prime, play out on his main screen. He was human, though no one in the Federation would have known it by looking at him. His people had changed a lot during their long exile. "You hear that, old friend?" he asked the empty bridge. A voice crackled through the speakers, belonging to Admiral Stone on another hidden ship light years away. "I heard it. They remember us as legends. That's either going to make things a lot easier or a whole lot harder." Captain Ross managed to smile, but there was no joy in it. "The Void Reapers are making their move toward the core worlds. If we sit back and do nothing, the entire Federation will be wiped out within a year. And if we show ourselves," Stone's voice replied, "the galaxy finds out that some legends are very, very real." Ross got up and walked over to the viewport. Out in the darkness, he could just make out the shapes of other ships just like his, cloaked in shadow. The human fleet had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. They had watched the galaxy evolve from the sidelines, secretly rebuilding their strength. "Send the signal to all ships," Ross commanded. "It's time for humanity to come home." Across the vast emptiness of space, dozens of hidden ships began to stir. They had been spread throughout the galaxy, just watching and waiting. Now, for the first time in 1,000 years, they would come together. Back on Nexus Prime, Elder Nix sat all alone in his study, poring over the old records. Something from the meeting just wouldn't leave him alone. He ran his calculations one more time, and then his eyes shot open in disbelief. His data was showing strange energy spikes in several star systems over the last few weeks. The readings were a perfect match for the descriptions in the ancient human archives. Someone using human technology had been moving through Federation territory. He instinctively reached for his emergency communicator, but then he paused. Who would possibly believe him? Who would listen to the paranoid ramblings of an old scholar? But as he sat there in the quiet dark, a new sound echoed through his study. It was coming from an ancient communication device, one that hadn't powered on in centuries. The device was tuned to a frequency that was only mentioned in the oldest of records. A voice came through, clear and powerful. It spoke in the old human tongue, a language Elder Nix had dedicated his life to studying. "Elder Keeper, this is Captain Ross of the Terran Defense Fleet. We have heard your words. We have seen your struggle. The children of Earth are coming home." Elder Nix's walking stick clattered to the floor. His hand trembled as he reached for the device. Who are you?" he whispered. "We are the ones from your legends," the voice answered. "We are human, and we're done hiding." The old scholar just sat there in stunned silence as the communication went dead. Outside his window, the 3 moons of Nexus Prime hung in the sky. But now, there was something else up there. A new star, one that hadn't been there a moment ago, was growing brighter with every passing second. The legends were about to become real, and the galaxy was never going to be the same again. 3 days after that big meeting on Nexus Prime, something weird showed up on the fringes of Federation space. Mining Station Omega-7 was a tiny outpost carved into an asteroid way off the main travel routes. The crew there spent their days digging for rare metals and shipping them back to the core worlds. Chief Engineer Blake was sipping his morning coffee when the alarms started blaring. Blake was a Corvan, with tough gray skin and a cybernetic left arm and eye. He'd been working in space for 30 years and had never seen anything like what was on his sensor screen. "What in the 7 hells is that?" he mumbled, staring at the display. His assistant, a young Tethion named Iris, floated over for a look. Her species could fly in low gravity, and her blue and silver feathers shimmered in the station's lights. "I don't know," she said, her voice like music. "The computer has no idea. The ship is way too big to be a pirate, but the design doesn't match any military ship in our entire database." The thing on their screen was absolutely massive. It dwarfed a Federation battleship, yet it moved with a strange, smooth grace that seemed impossible for something of its size. Its hull was made of a dark metal that seemed to drink the light, with glowing patterns running along its sides. Station Commander Pike, a jumpy Valoran whose whiskers were twitching nervously, tried to hail the mystery ship. "Unknown vessel. This is Mining Station Omega-7. Please identify yourself and state your purpose in Federation space." Nothing. The ship just kept getting closer, slow and steady, like it wasn't in any kind of hurry. "Maybe their comm system is different," Iris suggested. "Should we send out a probe to check it out?" "Absolutely not," Pike snapped. "We stick to the book. Send a priority alert to Fleet Command and bring the defense grid online." The station's few defensive cannons powered up, but everyone knew they wouldn't do a thing against a ship that enormous. The miners stopped what they were doing and crowded around the windows, trying to get a glimpse of their strange visitor. Inside that approaching ship, Commander Elena stood on the bridge, calmly watching the little mining station on her view screen. She was human, though she looked a bit different from the humans in the old Federation pictures. Her people had adapted during their long exile, becoming stronger and quicker. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, and her eyes carried the wisdom of countless battles. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Davis reported from his console, "the station has activated its defenses and just sent a distress signal to Federation Command." Elena simply nodded. "As expected. How long until the nearest Federation patrol can get here?" 6 hours, based on their current fleet positions." "Good. That gives us plenty of time." Elena turned to her tactical officer. "Marcus, begin passive scans. I want to know every single thing about their tech and their defenses." The human ship's sensors reached out like invisible hands, probing every system on the mining station. The scans were so sophisticated that they learned more in 5 minutes than Federation scientists could figure out in months of study. "Interesting," Marcus reported. "Their shields are based on crystalline matrix tech, but they're using it all wrong. Their power distribution is a mess, and their weapons are at least 50 years behind what they could be building with the same materials." Elena gave a sad little smile. 1,000 years ago, we were the ones who taught them how to build those shields. They've forgotten so much." On the mining station, Chief Engineer Blake was noticing something very strange. His instruments were picking up energy readings that made absolutely no sense. The mystery ship was scanning them, but it was like nothing he'd ever encountered before. "Commander Pike," he called over the intercom, "you need to get down here and see this. The energy signatures coming off that ship, they don't match anything in our records. This technology is completely alien." Pike scrambled to the engineering deck, his whiskers twitching like crazy now. "What do you mean, unknown? Every piece of tech in the galaxy is cataloged." "Not this," Blake said, pointing at his screen. "Just look at these readings. The power output alone should be impossible. And these scan patterns, they're learning our systems faster than our own computers can even track them." Meanwhile, back in the deep archives on Nexus Prime, Elder Nix was having the single most bizarre day of his very long life. After that incredible conversation with the human, he had spent hours digging through the oldest, most restricted records. What he found made his ancient heart pound with a mix of pure excitement and absolute terror. "By the old gods," he whispered, staring at a data file that had been locked away for centuries. "It's all true." The file was filled with technical blueprints for human warships from the old era, and the designs were a perfect match for the strange ships being reported all across the galaxy. For weeks, strange ships had been flickering at the edge of Federation space, ghosts that would appear, watch, and then vanish. They were a mystery, but not a threat. The threat was the Void Reapers, an enemy that had already wiped out 17 colonies. And now, they were coming for Harvex Prime. On the brink of annihilation, an old communication channel crackled to life with a voice he hadn't heard in 1,000 years. "Elder Keeper," it said, strong and clear. "We know you've been digging through the old archives. We know you have questions." Nix, the old scholar, felt a shiver run down his spine. "So many questions," he breathed. "Where did you go? Why did you leave? And why, after all this time, are you back now? The voice replied, tinged with an ancient sadness. We left because we had to. The galaxy wasn't ready for us. We were too good at fighting. We were breaking everything we touched. Nix looked at the old texts. But the records say you were the greatest warriors. They called you human. We were, the voice confirmed. And that was the entire problem. When the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. We had to go away and learn a new way to build. Elder Nix sank into his chair, the weight of history pressing down on him. So what are you now? He asked. We are still warriors, the voice answered. But now, we only fight, when there is no other choice. The Void Reapers, they have taken that choice away from us. Meanwhile, at mining station Omega-7, one of the mysterious ships had reappeared, hanging just beyond the reach of their weapons. For 2 agonizing hours, it just sat there. Then every single screen on the station flashed to life with a message. It was written in Federation Standard, but the words felt different. It was like reading an ancient poem, formal and heavy with meaning. People of the Federation, it began. After a long silence, we greet you. We are the children of Earth. In your stories, you call us human. We have come back because a great darkness is rising to swallow all life in this galaxy. Soon you are going to need our help, and we offer it freely, just as we did a lifetime ago. Do not be afraid. We are not your enemies. We are your guardians, returned from our long watch. Commander Pike stared at the message, reading it 3 times before the words finally clicked in his brain. Humans, he whispered, the name feeling foreign on his tongue. Actual humans. As if on cue, the ship on his screen began to transform. Panels slid away, revealing weapon systems that looked like nothing the Federation had ever designed. A strange energy crackled along its hull, weaving patterns of light that were both beautiful and absolutely terrifying. Ma'am, Lieutenant Davis reported, his voice tight with tension. Federation patrol ships are on an intercept course. 3 light cruisers. Commander Elena, aboard her own vessel, simply nodded. It's time for a little demonstration. Signal our ships in sectors 7 and 12. Tell them it's time to come out of hiding. All across the galaxy, dozens of hidden human ships suddenly blazed into existence on Federation sensors. Each one was unique, but they all moved with the same lethal grace. The Federation fleets that stumbled upon them sent frantic, panicked reports back to High Command. On the capital world of Nexus Prime, Admiral Keth could only stare at the flood of reports in utter disbelief. It's impossible, he muttered for the 10th time that day. Humans are a myth, a bedtime story for children. But the sensor data was undeniable. The ships were real, and they were everywhere. They hadn't just arrived. They had been here the whole time, hiding in the dark spaces between stars, watching and waiting. Now, all at once, they had shown themselves. Elder Nix's communicator sparked to life again. Elder Keeper, please tell your Federation friends we would like to schedule a meeting. It is time for old allies to talk again. The Void Reapers are making a direct run for your core worlds. They'll be there in less than a month. If you face them alone, you will be annihilated. But if we stand together, we might just have a chance. The old scholar didn't hesitate. He grabbed his emergency communicator and began blasting out messages to every leader he knew. The legends were back, and they were bringing with them the hope of salvation and the promise of a war bigger than anything the galaxy had ever imagined. The Federation fleet gathered at Harvex Prime felt small, almost pathetic, against the coming storm. Admiral Keth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Valoran Spear, and did the math for the 100th time. 18 ships. That was it. It was the biggest fleet they could scramble on such short notice. Sir, his tactical officer Quinn reported grimly. Long-range sensors confirm 47 Void Reaper ships on final approach. They'll be here in less than 3 hours. Keth squeezed his eyes shut, picturing the 3 million civilians on the beautiful planet below. Harvex Prime was a paradise of golden forests and shimmering crystal cities. In just a few hours, it was going to be a smoldering, radioactive wasteland. "Any word from High Command on reinforcements?" he asked, already knowing the answer was no. "Negative, sir," Quinn confirmed. "The closest fleet is 6 days out." Keth gave a grim nod. So this was it. This is where they would make their last stand. They were outnumbered more than 2 to 1, with weapons that were practically useless against the Reaper's technology. It was going to be a glorious defeat, the kind poets write about, assuming there were any poets left alive to write it. And then, something impossible happened. "Sir," Quinn's voice was shaky, laced with something that sounded like fear. "I'm picking up 7 new contacts, coming in fast from the outer system. Very fast." "More Reapers?" Keth demanded. "No, sir. The energy signatures. They're like nothing I've ever seen. These ships aren't in any of our databases." A cold chill traced its way down Admiral Keth's spine. "Put them on the main screen." The image that flashed onto the screen stole the breath from his lungs. 7 ships, each one bigger than his flagship, were slicing through space with an impossible, liquid grace. Their hulls seemed to shift in color, shimmering like polished steel. They were the most beautiful and deadly things he had ever seen. "Admiral Keth of the Federation Fleet," a voice suddenly filled the bridge, calm and confident. "This is Commander Elena of the human vessel Defiant Thunder. We're here to help." The entire bridge went dead silent. Human. The word just hung there in the air. After what felt like an eternity, Keth found his voice. "That's impossible. Humans are legends. You can't be real." A soft sound, maybe a chuckle, came over the speakers. "Admiral, legends don't typically come equipped with plasma cannons that can crack a moon in half. We've been watching you. The Void Reapers will be here in 2 hours and 53 minutes. You have 18 ships. They have 47. I don't like those odds. Do you?" Keth glanced at the tactical display. The 7 new ships had already moved, forming a defensive screen around his tiny fleet in a pattern that was complex, elegant, and looked utterly unbreakable. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice barely a whisper. "We're exactly who we say we are," Elena replied. "We are the descendants of the humans your ancestors fought alongside. We've been waiting in the shadows for the day the galaxy needed us again. It looks like that day is today." Down on the planet, Governor Wells was desperately trying to organize the evacuation of Harvex Prime's largest cities. Wells was a Theon, with brilliant blue feathers and large, worried eyes. He was a man of peace, not a wartime commander, but he was doing his best. "Captain Tor," he called to his aide. "What's the status on the underground shelters?" Tora, a young Corvan whose wings were twitching with nervous energy, glanced at his datapad. "About 2 million are safe, sir, but those shelters won't do a thing if the Reapers decide to use planet-killer weapons." Wells nodded, his heart heavy. They both knew it was a false hope, a way to make people feel like something was being done. Once the fleet was gone, the planet was next. "Sir," Tor said suddenly, his eyes wide as he stared at his sensor screen. "I'm picking up new ships in orbit, 7 of them, huge vessels, and they're not Federation design." "Reaper scouts?" Wells asked, dread coiling in his stomach. "No, sir," Tor replied. "These are something, else. The energy signatures are off the charts." High above them, the human fleet was making its final preparations. Each ship was a work of art, a masterpiece of engineering forged in secret shipyards hidden in the dark emptiness between stars. They were armed with technology 1,000 years ahead of anything the Federation could even dream of. Captain Nathan stood on the bridge of the destroyer Wolf's Bane. His ship was the smallest of the 7, but it packed enough firepower to turn a city into a crater. He had spent his entire life training for this exact moment, for a war he prayed would never happen. "All ships, this is Admiral Stone," a voice echoed through the fleet's comms. Stone was in command of the flagship, Retribution's Edge, the most powerful warship humanity had ever built. "The Void Reapers are almost here. Remember your training. And remember why we are here. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity never abandons its friends." The Void Reaper fleet tore into the system like a scar across the stars. Their ships were all sharp angles and black metal, designed to inspire terror before they even fired a shot. They had already destroyed 17 Federation colonies without losing a single ship, and they expected this battle to be just as one-sided. "Void Reaper fleet detected," Quinn reported from the Valoran Spear. 47 ships, and, oh no, sir, they have 3 heavy dreadnoughts. Admiral Keth felt his blood run cold. 3 dreadnoughts. A single one of those monsters could have taken out his entire fleet without breaking a sweat. "All Federation ships!" Commander Elena's voice cut through the rising panic. "We suggest you fall back and form a defensive ring around the planet. Let us say hello first." "You're outnumbered almost 7-1, Keth protested, his voice strained. Elena's reply was perfectly calm. "Admiral, that's because you're thinking like someone who's never seen humans fight. Trust me, numbers aren't everything." The 7 human ships then did something incredible. They broke formation and spread out, moving into positions that seemed completely random. But Keth, a master strategist, saw the genius in it. Each ship had a perfect line of fire while being perfectly covered by its allies. It was a deadly, intricate dance. Aboard the assault carrier Iron Resolve, Captain Julia watched the enemy fleet grow on her screen. Her ship was filled with fighter craft, so fast and agile they looked like ghosts on the sensors. She watched the Void Reapers advance, and a cold, hard smile touched her lips. "Launch every fighter we have," she commanded, her voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. "It's time to show them what a human pilot can do." In an instant, dozens of sleek craft burst from the Iron Resolve, rocketing towards the enemy fleet. They moved with a grace and speed the Federation had never dreamed of, weaving through the blackness of space as if they were alive. The Void Reapers fired first, their dark energy weapons lashing out to obliterate the tiny ships. But the human fighters were ghosts. They dodged and juked in 3 dimensions, flying in patterns that seemed to break the laws of physics. "That's impossible," Admiral Keth breathed, his eyes glued to the tactical display. "Maneuvers like that should rip their ships to pieces." Elena just smiled faintly. "It's a little something we call human engineering. We don't build our ships and then find pilots who can fly them," she explained. "We build our ships to keep up with our pilots." Just then, the first Void Reaper vessel vanished in a silent, brilliant flash of light. A human fighter had somehow slipped straight through its shields and unleashed a weapon that tore it apart from the inside. A second ship exploded, and then a third. But the real jaw-dropper came when the human capital ships finally opened fire. The main cannons of the Defiant Thunder roared to life, unleashing beams of energy that looked like they were bending space itself. The beams struck a Void Reaper heavy cruiser and just deleted it. One moment, a massive warship hung in space. The next, nothing but empty void and a few glittering dust particles. "By the old gods," General Voss's voice crackled over the comms from his own ship. "What in the world are those weapons?" Admiral Stone's voice, calm and deadly, answered from the bridge of the Retribution's Edge. "They're the kind that end wars." The human flagship was now glowing, the space around it starting to ripple from the sheer energy it was containing. Stone's voice then broadcast across every channel, speaking to both his allies and his enemies. "To all ships, Federation and human, I recommend you pull back to a minimum safe distance immediately. We are about to give a demonstration of why humanity was never truly conquered." The weapon that fired from the Retribution's Edge was unlike anything in the Federation's history books. It was a spear of pure destruction that sliced through the Void Reaper formation like a hot knife through butter. 3 enemy heavy cruisers and their flagship simply stopped existing, leaving behind nothing but expanding clouds of superheated gas. In the stunned silence that followed, the voice of Elder Nyx echoed from Nexus Prime, where he'd been watching the whole thing. "The old legends spoke of their greatest weapon," the scholar said softly. "Not their technology, but their absolute refusal to accept defeat. Today, we are witnessing the return of humanity's children." For the first time in their entire recorded history, the Void Reapers started to fall back. But the Battle of Harvex Prime wasn't over. They hadn't lost their flagship and several capital ships just to run away. As everyone watched, they began to regroup, their remaining ships shifting into a completely new attack pattern, one Admiral Keth had never seen before. "Sir, they're adapting to our tactics on the fly," Quinn reported from his sensor station. "The Reapers are changing their shield frequencies and their entire battle formation." Admiral Keth watched the enemy fleet with a growing sense of dread. Even after that devastating first strike, 32 Void Reaper ships were still battle-ready. They were spreading out, forming a massive circle around the planet to attack from every direction at once. "Commander Elena," Keth called out over the comms, "the enemy is trying to surround us. They're going to force us to split our forces." "We see them, Admiral," Elena replied calmly from the defiant thunder. "Don't you worry. This is exactly what we were hoping they'd do." At that moment, Captain Nathan, commanding the Wolf's Bane, peeled his destroyer off to intercept a squadron of Reaper cruisers trying to flank the Federation fleet. His ship was a blur of speed and deadly precision, but he was staring down 5 enemy vessels all by himself. "Well, this ought to be interesting," Nathan muttered to his crew. "All weapons, target the lead cruiser. Let's show these guys why you never bet against a human." The Wolf's Bane lit up, firing weapons that looked like pure lightning. The energy beams slammed into the Void Reaper's shields, but instead of harmlessly dissipating, they somehow turned the enemy's own power against them. The first cruiser's shields instantly collapsed, and Nathan's follow-up shot shredded its hull like tissue paper. "How is that even possible?" General Voss demanded over the channel. "His weapons are using the enemy's own energy against them." "It's called adaptive plasma technology," Captain Julia explained from the Iron Resolve. "We've had 1,000 years to perfect it. With every shot, our weapons learn and get better." But the Void Reapers were learning too. They started firing in perfectly coordinated volleys, trying to overwhelm the human ships with sheer firepower. A few human ships took hits, and the port shields on the Defiant Thunder flickered dangerously under a massive barrage. "Elena," Admiral Stone's voice cut in from the Retribution's edge. "Your shields are down to 60%. Fall back and let us take this group." "Negative, Admiral," Elena replied without hesitation. "We hold the line right here. If they get past us, they'll have a clear shot at the planet." Down on Harvex Prime, Governor Wells was watching the battle on orbital sensors. The underground shelters were packed, but he knew they wouldn't save his people if the Reapers made it to the surface. "Captain Torrey," he called to his aide, "how many civilians are still up in the cities?" "About 50,000, sir. Mostly emergency crews and folks who just refuse to leave their homes." Wells gave a grim nod. He understood them. Harvex Prime was a beautiful world. It was their home. If this was the end, they wanted to face it under their own sky. "Sir," Torrey said suddenly, his voice filled with awe. "Something is happening in orbit. The human ships. They're changing." Wells stared at the tactical display, and his jaw dropped. Before his very eyes, the 7 human vessels were transforming. Hull panels were sliding away to reveal weapon systems that had been completely hidden. Engine sections were extending and reconfiguring. In a matter of seconds, each ship had become something entirely new. "What are they doing?" Wells whispered, mesmerized. Up in space, a small smile touched Commander Elena's lips as her ship completed its transformation. The Defiant Thunder was no longer just a battleship. It had become a mobile fortress, a weapons platform with the firepower of an entire fleet. "All ships," she announced over the human fleet's private channel, "initiate Protocol 7, full combat configuration." The other human ships followed her lead. Captain Nathan's Wolf's Bane sprouted additional weapon pods and shield projectors. Captain Julia's Iron Resolve opened up like a metallic flower, revealing new fighter bays and missile batteries that doubled its size. And Admiral Stone's Retribution's Edge, it became something that defied all description. It was a ship of such an advanced and alien design that the Federation's sensors couldn't even track all of its moving parts. "Magnificent," Elder Nix breathed from his archives on Nexus Prime, where he was glued to the live feed. The old record spoke of ships that could reshape themselves for any battle. We thought it was just poetry, not engineering. The transformed human fleet hit the Void Reapers like a tidal wave. Weapons that had been hidden just moments before opened fire with absolutely devastating results. The enemy's new shields and clever tactics, which had been working so well, were suddenly useless against these completely different forms of attack. Captain Nathan now found himself facing 10 Void Reaper ships instead of 5, but his transformed destroyer was more than a match for them. His new weapon systems fired streams of particles that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, bypassing the enemy shields completely. "This is impossible," a voice suddenly broadcast on all channels. It was the first time anyone had ever heard a Void Reaper speak. Their voice sounded like grinding metal mixed with the sound of dying stars. "What? Are you?" Elena's voice replied, simple and clear. "We're human, and we protect our own." The battle immediately turned into a rout. The Void Reapers, a race that had never known true defeat, were being outgunned and outmaneuvered by 7 ships that seemed to break every known rule of space combat. Their formations shattered as human weapons exploited weaknesses the Reapers never even knew they had. But the Void Reapers had one last, desperate card to play. Their remaining dreadnought, a colossal ship the size of a small moon, began charging a weapon that made space itself glow with a sick, unholy energy. "A planet killer," Admiral Keth said, his voice laced with horror. "They're going to destroy Harvex Prime just out of spite." "Not on my watch," Admiral Stone said quietly. The Retribution's Edge began to move towards the enemy dreadnought, its massive hull practically humming with contained power. "Elena, Julia, Nathan, all of you stay back. This is going to get dangerous." "Admiral, you can't!" Elena protested. "That ship is too big for any one vessel to take on alone." "That's where you're wrong," Stone replied, his voice filled with a strange confidence. "I am not just any one vessel." The Retribution's Edge closed in on the Void Reaper dreadnought like a shark stalking its prey. The enemy ship threw everything it had at it, weapons that could wipe out entire fleets. But somehow, the human flagship dodged every single shot. It moved through space with the grace of a dancer, both beautiful and deadly. When Stone's ship finally fired, the weapon it used was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed. It wasn't energy, or a projectile, or some kind of exotic matter. It was something that reached into the very heart of the enemy vessel, and simply turned off its ability to exist. The Void Reaper dreadnought, which had seemed invincible just moments before, began to come apart, not in an explosion of fire and shrapnel, but by unraveling, like a piece of cloth being pulled apart thread by thread. What is that?" Admiral Keith's voice was a mix of awe and pure terror. Admiral Stone watched the display, her heart heavy. "It's the kind of weapon we pray we never have to use again," she said quietly. "The kind that made us leave the galaxy in the first place." The last of the Void Reaper ships having just witnessed their most powerful vessel get erased by a technology they couldn't comprehend, did something they had never done in their entire history. They ran. They tore open space-time and vanished, leaving behind the shattered remains of their fleet and their legend of being unbeatable. Down on the surface of Harvick's Prime, Governor Wells stood in the sudden, deafening silence and looked up at the stars. His world was safe. His people were alive, all thanks to 7 ships piloted by ghosts from a forgotten age. "Captain Tor," he said to his aide, his voice trembling with relief. "Get a message to the human fleet. Tell them Harvick's Prime owes them a debt that can never be repaid." His aide hesitated. "What do I call them, sir? What title do you give legends when they show up at your door?" Wells thought about it for a second, then a genuine smile broke across his face. "Call them what they are. Call them our guardians." 2 weeks after the battle, the largest gathering in galactic history was underway on Nexus Prime. The Crystal Meeting Hall was expanded to 3 times its size, and it was still packed shoulder to shoulder with delegates from every major civilization in the galaxy, all here to see the legends for themselves. Admiral Stone took her seat at the massive round table with the Federation's top brass. She didn't look like the other humans who had recently come forward. Her silver hair was tied back in a severe military bun, and her uniform was decorated with ranks no one in the Federation recognized. Her eyes held the weight of 100 wars, and she had an air about her that commanded respect, even from proud warriors like General Voss. "The question before us," Admiral Keth began, his voice echoing through the hall, "isn't if humans have returned. We all saw the proof at Harvick's Prime. The question is, what happens now?" Elder Nix, the keeper of ancient records, slowly raised a fragile hand from his place of honor. "Before we decide our future," he rasped, "maybe we should first understand the past." "Admiral Stone, would you be willing to tell us where humanity has been for the last 1,000 years? Stone gave a slow, deliberate nod. "We left Galactic Society because we had no other choice. 1,000 years ago, we weren't the guardians you see today. We were conquerors. We answered every problem with our fists, every disagreement with a war. We were tearing apart the very galaxy we thought we were leading." Ambassador Lyra, whose silver skin seemed to ripple with emotion, asked softly, "What happened? What made you change?" Stone's gaze was distant. "We ran into something worse than us," she said. "An enemy from outside the galaxy that held up a mirror and showed us the monsters we'd become. Fighting them taught us that the greatest victory is knowing when to stop. So we made a choice. We would leave, start over, and only come back when we were truly needed." Captain Ross, a diplomat who had been silent until now, stood up. He had been chosen to speak because he understood the language of both peace and war. "We spent 1,000 years trying to be better. We built new ships, new tech, but the most important thing we built was wisdom. We've been watching over the galaxy from the shadows, protecting you in ways you never even realized." General Voss leaned forward, his polished armor gleaming. "You say you were protecting us? We never saw you. How can you protect what you don't see?" Commander Elena offered a smile that wasn't entirely friendly. "General, tell me, how many true galaxy-wide wars have there been in the last 1,000 years? Not little border skirmishes, but full-scale threats." "None," Voss admitted, almost begrudgingly. "It's been a relatively peaceful millennium." "That wasn't an accident," Elena stated plainly. "Every time a new threat started to bubble up, every time some would-be emperor tried to upset the balance, we were there. You never saw us because we made sure you never had to. Until now." A lieutenant handed Admiral Stone a data pad. "Ma'am, our intel confirms the Void Reapers have pulled back to the Outer Rim. They're regrouping, but their advance has stalled." Stone's expression turned grim. "For now, but they'll be back. The Reapers aren't like any enemy you've faced. They don't quit. They don't negotiate. They don't know mercy. They'll study what happened at Harvick's Prime, and they will adapt." Governor Wells, who had made the journey from his rescued world, spoke up. his voice filled with urgency. "So what's the plan? How do we get ready for their return?" Captain Julia, a fighter pilot who was already a legend among her Federation counterparts, answered him directly. "We do it together. The Federation has the resources and the industrial power that we lack. We have the technology and the combat experience that you need. If we stand alone, we'll be picked off one by one. But together? Together, we might just have a chance." The debate that followed was long and intense, but it was never hostile. Federation leaders had endless questions about human tech, their military structure, and what their long-term plans were. The humans were just as cautious, worried about sharing their advanced weaponry with civilizations that might one day misuse it. Elder Nix listened to it all with the kind of patience that only comes from living for 1,000 years. Finally, he rose, his walking stick tapping gently on the crystal floor. "If I may," the old scholar said, "I have spent my life studying the past to help us navigate the present. The oldest records mention an ancient alliance, a bond between early humanity and the fledgling Federation. It wasn't a treaty between equals. It was a promise between a protector and those they protected. Perhaps it's time we renewed that promise." "What are you talking about?" Admiral Keth asked. Elder Nix turned his ancient eyes to Admiral Stone. "The records call it the Guardian Compact, a sacred vow that humanity made to watch over the younger races of the galaxy. You left to fulfill that vow in your own way, but you've returned. Will you honor that old compact again?" Stone was silent for what felt like an eternity, her gaze sweeping across the faces at the table. At last, she spoke. "The Guardian Compact was broken when we left, because we were no longer worthy of it. We had become the very monsters we swore to protect you from. But if you'll have us back, if you're willing to trust us, knowing what we were, then yes, we will honor the compact." General Voss slammed his armored fist on the table, but this time, it was a gesture of agreement. "Good. Then let's start talking strategy. How many ships can you commit to our joint defense? What technology are you willing to share? How do we merge our fleets?" The planning session that followed was a marathon, lasting for 3 straight days. Star charts were drawn, supply chains were mapped out, and joint training exercises were designed. The Federation would provide the massive manufacturing base and endless raw materials. The humans would bring their advanced tech and tactical genius to the table. Captain Nathan, who had become a star after personally taking out 5 Void Reaper cruisers, was assigned to train Federation pilots. His first students were the battle-hardened survivors of earlier Reaper attacks. Pilots who had lost everything and were burning for a little payback. "The first thing you need to get into your heads," Nathan told his new class, "is that space combat isn't about who has the biggest laser or the thickest hull. It's about outthinking your enemy. It's about being where they least expect you and hitting them where they're most vulnerable." At the same time, Captain Julia was in the shipyards, working with Federation engineers to upgrade their fighter designs. The changes seemed small to her, but they would make the Federation squadrons 3 times more lethal. "We can't just give you our top-of-the-line tech," she explained to a team of eager engineers. "Not because we don't trust you, but because you're not physically ready for it. Your pilots would black out just trying to fly our ships. But we can make your ships better, faster, and a whole lot deadlier." The real game changer, however, came from Elder Nix. Digging through the deepest parts of the archives, in files that hadn't been seen in centuries, he found something incredible. Technical schematics for joint Human Federation weapon systems. Designs that were co-developed during the original Guardian Compact, and then lost to time. "This is remarkable," he breathed, showing the ancient blueprints to Admiral Stone. "Your ancestors and mine designed these weapons together. It's not human tech, and it's not Federation tech. It's a true hybrid, something that combines the best of both worlds." Stone smiled, a flicker of warmth in her battle-weary eyes. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days, when human and Federation engineers worked side by side. I always thought they were just fairy tales. Perhaps, Elder Nick suggested gently, it's time we made them real again. 3 months later, the first joint Human Federation patrol headed for the Outer Rim. The fleet was small, 2 human destroyers and 4 upgraded Federation cruisers, all armed with the new hybrid weapons. They found the Void Reapers right where they expected them to be. The battle was over in minutes. The Reapers had prepared for human tactics and for Federation technology, but they had absolutely no answer for the 2 combined. The joint squadron destroyed 8 enemy capital ships without taking a single scratch. "Don't pop the champagne just yet!" Admiral Stone's voice crackled across the comms to the cheering crews. "The Void Reapers will learn from this, and we've got to be ready when they come back. But for today, we proved the old alliance still has teeth in this new galaxy." As news of their incredible win zipped through Federation space, parties erupted on dozens of planets. For the first time in what felt like forever, people could gaze at the night sky without a knot of dread in their stomachs. Humanity had returned, the Alliance was whole again, and the galaxy once more had protectors. In his quiet office on Nexus Prime, Elder Nix carefully updated the historical logs. After 1,000 long years, he could finally write a worthy final chapter to the story of humankind's great departure. But more than that, he was penning the first lines of a brand new story in the galaxy's history. A new age for the Guardian Compact had just begun, and this time both humans and the Federation were united, prepared for any darkness that dared to creep out of the emptiness between the stars.